In 1978, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill gave us a film that's been living in our hearts and in our minds for 42 years now. In that film, they also gave us one of the greatest horror icons of all time. In addition to that, 10 more movies have been made in this franchise, giving us a total of 11 films. A couple of those films are reasonably questionable. A few of those films are absolutely legendary. We have 10 classic slashers and 1 red-headed stepchild. This is my ranking of those films. This is Halloween. Ranked. The time has come. You ready to do this or what? Coming in at number 11 is Halloween Resurrection. Right off the bat, the paramedic switch thing absolutely drove me nuts. I don't think that there's any way in the world that that guy would have gone through everything that he went through and never pulled that mask off. If they're going to push the storyline that this guy had his larynx crushed and he couldn't talk, so be it. Whatever. I don't even care. But larynx crushed or not, you're pulling that mask off to let somebody know who it actually is. I'm sure you're of the understanding that you have a mask on your face. Any human that wakes up out of any state is going to recognize that they have something over their head. This dude's pulling that off. There's no way in the world he's getting out of that sleeping bag. And if it's a paramedic, why did he attack Laurie in that van? That whole scene drove me absolutely crazy. Yeah, I get it. Michael Myers has to stay alive in order to make another film, but you got to bring something. You got to come harder than that, as far as I'm concerned. The way that they got rid of Laurie Strode in this movie after she was the most iconic character in this series next to Michael Myers and Dr. Loomis drives me nuts. I think that they should have just paid their respect to Jamie Lee Curtis and Laurie Strode a little bit stronger than this, than basically just dropping her off the side of the building and then switching the story completely away from that, making that totally unnecessary. Moving on to Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks and Dangertainment. I don't think as a whole that Dangertainment idea was awful. I think they could have done something with that. They could have gone somewhere with that. But I think the idea of it being Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks is awful. Enough with the rappers. Come on, get rid of the rappers. Let's get actors in our Halloween movies. And Tyra Banks, from what I've seen, is not the most savory of human beings. She seems like that's for another time. I think they could have done something, but searching for clues in a house 20 plus years after the events that took place in 1978 is kind of silly. Why would there be any clues left in this house? Why is there an underground tunnel from inside of the house out to the shed? Why is there like a lair under there that nobody ever found ever, but Busta Rhymes found? It's the whole thing is just weird to me, and I don't like it. There are parts of this movie that I did like. I liked the clown in the beginning of the movie that was in the psychiatric hospital. I thought he was cool. The look of Michael Myers was all right. The portrayal of Michael Myers was all right. But overall, as a whole, this movie is definitely my least favorite of the franchise. Coming in at number 10 is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Now, the beginning of this movie was spectacular. It's some of the best work that Rob Zombie has done throughout all of his movies, especially the 2 Halloween installments that he made. When she's dreaming and Michael Myers is chasing her in that hospital and outside of that hospital, and his mask is all chewed up and it's pouring rain outside, it is scary. It's fantastic, suspenseful, brilliant, brutal filmmaking. And then we move on to the rest of the movie. After Laurie wakes up, I don't like very much about this movie at all. I think that Brad Dourif in this movie as Sheriff Brackett was brilliant. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in that role. And for me, he did the best acting job, other than maybe Tyler Mane as Michael Myers. But let's face the facts. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have any speaking role. Well, he says a word. But Brad Dourif's acting job is fantastic as Sheriff Brackett. His sense of anger and dread and emotion in this movie is wonderful. Tyler Mane as Michael Myers is horrifying. I think that he's definitely one of the better Michael Myers portrayals, tongue twister, portrayals throughout this franchise as well. He's huge, he's intimidating, he's sincerely scary. All right, moving on to the things that I don't like. I hated Dr. Loomis in this movie. I thought McDowell did a fine job acting, and I thought that Dr. Loomis was great in the original Rob Zombie's Halloween, but the script in this movie made him so unlikable that you would have just hoped that Michael Myers would have killed him off sooner. He turned him into a scumbag, and I don't like that at all. Loomis was never intended to be a scumbag, and I just did not like Rob. I like a lot of Rob Zombie's spins on a whole lot of different stuff. I did not like his spin on Dr. Loomis, especially pivoting from who he was in the first movie to who he became in the second movie. I did not care for that at all. Another thing that I absolutely did not like is all of the grunting that Michael Myers does in this movie. I think it's silly, quite frankly. I don't like all the grunting. I don't like the scenes you see him walking around like a hobo, wandering around like a nomad out there. I don't like any of that without his mask on. Don't care for any of that at all. The majority of the characters in this movie, all the little side characters, Laurie's friends and what have you, all just seem genuine, like all the people that work at the Rabbit and Red, just dirtbags. I'm so tired and over the Rob Zombie white trash dirtbag characters that he puts in all of his movies. And I think that there was so much of that in this movie. Even Annie Brackett in this movie, she was okay in the first Halloween movie. I don't think she was all that wonderful of a character in the 2007 original Rob Zombie movie either, but she was okay. In this movie, she was completely unlikable. Laurie Strode in this movie was borderline unlikable. I just don't understand why he makes his movies and fills them all the way from the bottom to the top with people you just don't like. And that's what he did for me in Halloween 2. And then there's the White Horse and Sherry Moon Zombie's ghost in this movie. Drove me crazy. When I and to the point where when I think of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, the only thing that pops into my head right away is that friggin' horse. I hated that horse so bad. Just what kind of effort does this guy go through and hoops does he jump through in order to shoehorn and force his wife into a movie? It's disturbing. We've seen your wife, Rob. She's a good-looking woman. Wonderful. We all know she's married to you. Give it a break, dude. Coming in at number 9 is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. All right out, I think immediately the first thing that's got to be said was I was unbelievably excited as a really young guy when this movie was coming out and I started seeing the advertisements for it, simply because we were getting Michael Myers back. I remember watching the trailers for this movie on TV and just was elated that we were actually going to see him again and not more trick-or-treaters. Michael Myers is Halloween. He belongs in the Halloween movies, so let's get that out of the way. Next up comes the actual movie itself. I remember watching this movie over and over and over on television, on cable. I recorded it onto a VCR tape. I watched it seemingly 1,000 times. I watched it every day. Loved Halloween 4. But now that I go back and watch it, it didn't age well for me. I don't like Jamie Lloyd, as the character Jamie Lloyd, Daniel Harris's character in this movie, drove me crazy with her nonstop crying and screaming. I think that, I guess when they decided to go in this direction, and she's like the long lost daughter of Laurie Strode, whatever. I can live with that. And we have lived with that now for 25 or however many years, 30 years, however long it's been, we've lived with that. What was it, 1988? Something like that this movie came out, somewhere in that area. So it's at 98, 08, 30 years. We've been living with this. She's Laurie Strode's long lost daughter. Whatever. But the crying and the constant screaming, and that stuff, it was infuriating. The look of Michael Myers in this movie is pretty ridiculous. Everybody keeps saying that he looks like somebody from Star Trek. Is it Beta? I don't know. I don't watch Star Trek. But I've seen multiple people say that that's who he looks like in this movie, and I don't disagree with him. I think he looks absolutely ridiculous. He looks like he could put on a suit and go to a job interview, for God's sake. I think it's really weird. Then let's go to the beginning of the movie. The movie starts off with Michael Myers being transferred from crazy house to crazy house, and he's in a coma, and he hears two ambulance assistants or doctors or whatever, paramedics, whatever, discussing Laurie Strode and Jamie Lloyd in the back of this ambulance, and that snaps him out of a coma. When he jumps up, he sticks his thumb through the middle of somebody's forehead. It's kind of outrageous, but I guess I can live with that. It's a horror movie. All of this stuff is outrageous. But I just thought that was weird, and he was immediately okay again and got up and killed a bunch of people and moved about his day. So that was all strange for me. The whole coma thing was weird for me. The movie didn't age well. I didn't like Jamie Lloyd. I didn't like the look of Michael Myers, but I did like several sequences in this movie towards the end. When he gets into a house that everybody is kind of bunkered down in toward the end of the movie, it's scary. It's really good. It's really good filmmaking. It's compelling. That's really, really good stuff. It's a shame for me that it followed a bunch of really, really bad stuff. So the sequences inside of the house were awesome. The sequences of him outside of the house when Rachel and Jamie are separated from each other and he's wandering around looking for them, and all the while Loomis and another police officer are looking for him, all of that stuff's good. So the first half of the movie I can do without. The second half of the movie is really good. So I'm kind of split down the middle on this movie. I like it, but like I said earlier, it just didn't age well for me. Coming in at number 8 is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Okay, the beginning of this movie, Michael Myers, we see him, we actually are given the ending of Halloween 4, where he's shot 200 times and falls down into an old abandoned mine shaft. He's wearing one mask when he gets shot, and when he comes out of that mine shaft, he's wearing a different mask. That is absurd filmmaking, and I don't like. I hate everything about that, and that's one of the things that my mind goes to immediately when I think of this movie. On top of that, we get a Jamie Lloyd who is now not only annoying, now she's a mute, and her translator stutters, and Jamie now has a psychological connection with Michael Myers. All of that stuff drove me nuts. It drove me nuts way back in the day when I watched it years and years ago, and it drove me really especially nuts now. None of that aged well for me, just like Halloween 4, and to be totally honest with you, Halloween 4 and Halloween 5 could flip-flop in this ranking for me, depending on which side of the bed I get up on, I think. They almost feel like the same movie, just like 3.5 hours long and split in two. There's so much about this movie that I did not like, but there's also stuff about this movie that I did like. I like the whole Man in Black thing. I thought that was kind of neat. It was very mysterious. You just knew when you got glimpses of this guy that he was up to no good. I liked all that stuff. I thought that the actual look of Michael Myers after he put on his new mask when he came out of that mine shaft, I thought that was pretty neat. There's a scene in this movie where he's chasing Jamie up and down a laundry chute. That's really cool. And there's another scene where Loomis is holding Jamie and a cop basically hostage inside of a house, and Myers is coming, and they know he's coming, and they're trying to get him to come. They're basically using Jamie as bait. That stuff's kind of cool. But it's just, there's a lot that weighs this down for me that I didn't like. There's 2 cops in this movie that are accompanied by dopey music that just, that doesn't belong in a Halloween movie. I guess at the time, maybe it felt like it did, but that's one of the things that makes this not age well. Everybody complains about the character Tina in this movie, but it blows my mind. She's an annoying character. Yeah, she is absolutely an annoying character, but she doesn't drive me crazy nearly as much as those foul-mouthed scumbags in the Rob Zombie movies. She doesn't bother me nearly as much as those 2 friggin' dopey cops. She doesn't bother me as much as the boyfriend who's trying to get laid in a shed at the Halloween party. That guy was terrible. Tina was wonderful compared to all those other characters. Ronnie in the first Halloween movie? Give me a break. Tina is like Meryl Streep compared to some of these other people that have appeared in these movies. Coming in at number 7 is Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Alright, this one, I'll start off with the stuff that I don't like, being the whole cult thing. I don't like that whole the Curse of Thorn, the Cult of Thorn, whatever, Thorn. I think that that's all kind of silly. As I said for the last movie, I liked the whole idea of the Man in Black. I thought that was pretty cool. But that was prior to me seeing who the Man in Black was, actually. And I think that whole cult thing is just weird. He's a cult leader doctor from Smith's Grove. It's all phooey to me. I think it's odd. So you're telling me now that the whole idea behind that is when the stars line up a certain way, Michael Myers returns to kill again? So when he was a 6-year-old boy, or was he 5 or 6? When he was a little boy, the stars lined up and that's what made him kill his sister. And then the stars kept lining up and that's why he kept coming back. It's poor idea, bad filmmaking. I don't like any of that at all. Another thing I did not really like in this movie was the whole Jamie Lloyd being, what was it, J.C. Brandy, I think was her name, and not Danielle Harris. I discussed that in my review for this movie. I don't want to get too much into that, but it was a whole contract money thing, fashion in which Jamie died thing with Danielle Harris, whatever. I hated that they could not nail her down to be Jamie Lloyd, and we didn't get a chance to see her get killed by Michael Myers. That's something I would have liked. We had to wait until years and years later in Rob Zombie's movie to see Michael Myers kill Danielle Harris. But anyway, now moving on to the whole baby thing. I didn't like that at all either. Not the whole baby thing. It's not a matter that I didn't like that. I didn't like the manner in which Paul Rudd's character, Tommy Doyle, came across that baby. He went into a open and operating bus station and found a pool of blood on the ground with a trail of blood leading to a bathroom with a yelling baby inside, screaming baby inside of it, and nobody notices this baby. That's silly. That doesn't make any sense at all. If you are anywhere, in any situation, with any number of people around you, and a baby starts screaming, you notice it. In a bus station, in a echoing bathroom, you definitely notice. And you also really notice when there's a trail of blood leading you to that bathroom. Nobody could find that baby. I just think that's just whatever. Now, the things that I did like about this movie was just the feeling in this movie of almost like dread and impending doom. This movie overall felt very different for me than all of the Halloween movies. I thought Paul Rudd was really good. There's a girl in this movie, the main character in this movie is Marianne Hagen. What was her name? I can't remember. She was she was a Strode, a relative of Laurie's. Kara Strode, maybe? I liked all of that. She was outstanding. Paul Rudd was outstanding. Laurie Strode, or Kara Strode's father, her mother was a little bit I could live to give or take her. Couldn't stand the little boy who played her son. Her father was fabulous. That guy was a jerk. He was supposed to be a jerk, and he put a jerk on screen very, very well. I liked him a lot. The Michael Myers character, the look of Michael Myers was very cool. The way that actor carried that character out, I already don't remember which guy was Michael Myers. The way that he carried that through was awesome. Scenes of him and Paul Rudd were really good. Just as a whole, I thought Halloween 6 was a decent product, but like I said, it felt way different than every other movie in this franchise for me. And again, as I mentioned in my review for this movie, this was Donald Pleasance's last film before he passed away. So again, rest in peace, Donald Pleasance. Coming in at number 6 is Halloween H2O. Now this movie was like a breath of fresh air for me. It felt like a return to the franchise. It felt like comfort food, like a return home, a character we knew, portrayed by a great actress. This is what a Halloween movie is supposed to feel like. It was scary. It was incredibly well acted. It looked fantastic. The story was interesting. Everything about this one was good for me. Her going away and going into hiding and moving away was cool. Just everything about this, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. The way that the movie began, with Michael going to Dr. Loomis's old assistant to get Laurie Strode's case file, to find her. I liked all that stuff. I thought it was really, really good. And the opening sequence of this movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the other kid and Nurse Chambers, don't remember her real name. When Michael Myers gets to all of them, it's good. That's the way to start a Halloween movie. Not with a dude falling down a mine shaft and switching masks. This is what you want. Jamie Lee Curtis was great. Josh Hartnett was great. LL Cool J was even great. This is what you want in a Halloween movie. And the way that this movie ended, quite honestly, I would have been satisfied with it ending right there and us not being fed Halloween Resurrection. It's almost sinful to end such a fantastic movie with such a piece of trash like Halloween Resurrection. Well, I guess trash is harsh. I'll just say a lackluster effort in Halloween Resurrection. And Halloween H2O actually also showed you how strong of a character an actress, or how strong of a character Laurie Strode was, and how good of an actress Jamie Lee Curtis was. And then, going back to the Halloween Resurrection thing, it made no sense for me to immediately go from that strength to what they did to her in Resurrection. They literally hung a movie on her and then literally threw her away. That'll just never make sense to me. And another small detail that was in H2O that I actually forgot to mention when I did the review was there's a couple scenes in here with Janet Leigh, who was the girl in the movie Psycho, old Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. She was the main character in that movie, and she actually is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. In Halloween H2O, she actually goes outside and gets into a blue car that was the car she had in Psycho, and while that is going on, while those events are taking place, the main theme to Psycho is playing in the background. I thought that was pretty cool. It was a really neat little nod to Psycho there. Coming in at number 5 is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Remember that red-headed stepchild I mentioned at the intro to this video? That's Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. There are people out there who do not like this movie, not based on the movie, but based on the fact that Michael Myers is not in this movie, and it is called Halloween. I understand that that's kind of confusing, but as far as the movie goes, this movie's fabulous. If this movie, and I'm sure you've all heard this 1,000 times, if this movie was simply called Season of the Witch, and there was no mention of Halloween at all, people would have accepted this movie with a much more open mind and much more open arms, if that's more open arms, whatever. People would have accepted this movie more. I think that this movie was really well made. I think it's really, really cool. The idea is awesome. I understand why they did it. There was a whole concept here as to what they were going to try and do with the Halloween franchise, and not necessarily pin everything on Michael Myers. Although this movie was proof that if you want the franchise to be successful and take off, pin everything on Michael Myers, because he is what people liked about Halloween 1 and 2. But the whole Silver Shamrock Novelty Company and the masks that like rotted the kids' heads and I thought it was awesome. This movie was scary. It was interesting. Tom Atkins was fabulous in this movie. I liked everything about it. I love Halloween 3. I love this red-headed stepchild. I think it's awesome. Honestly, I think that some of the later films in this franchise wish that they were half as good as Halloween 3. Coming in at number 4 is Rob Zombie's Halloween. This movie has a special little place in my heart simply because it was released the day that my son Michael was born. That has absolutely nothing to do with my feelings on the movie as a whole, but I thought that was a cool little side note. On to the movie. I thought Rob Zombie did a phenomenal job with this movie. I liked the whole background of Michael Myers. There's two sides to that. I liked the whole background it kind of gives you an idea where this kid came from, and it gives you an idea of what may have happened or why he turned out the way he did. On one hand, you have that, and I think it's really cool. On the other hand, I think the less you know about Michael Myers, the scarier he is. Okay, so now that mixed feeling is out of the way, the character Ronnie, I'll get him out of the way as quickly as possible. The character Ronnie, which is Michael Myers' mother's boyfriend, William Forsythe's character in this movie, might be my least favorite character in the history of all 11 Halloween movies. I hated that character. He was an absolute scumbag, portrayed well. I mean, if your whole idea was to hate this guy, good job, Rob, and good job, William. Couldn't stand him. Well, I wanted to get up and clap when Michael killed this dude in this movie. Moving away from Ronnie, I thought that Tyler Mane was spectacular. I thought that the story was spectacular. Michael Myers in this movie was as brutal and vicious as you've ever seen him in a movie up to this point. I absolutely loved it. Dr. Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis was fantastic. What's Taylor Scout Compton? I hope that's her name. I always get the Taylor Scout thing reversed and mixed. Whatever. The character of Laurie Strode in this movie was fantastic. It's amazing how different you feel about the characters in this movie than you do about the same exact characters in Rob Zombie's sequel. It's almost like he said, you know what, the people like these characters too much in this movie. Let's make everybody hate them in the next movie, because I don't like the fact that people like these characters. I just don't understand that about him. Another character that was in this movie, though, that was a whole scene that I don't think was necessary, was the rape scene that took place at Smith's Grove. There's the dudes who carried out the rape in that scene. Why? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why's that got to be there? That's just another example of what I said earlier, of Rob Zombie just force-feeding unlikable characters in his movies. He wants you to hate the people he puts in his movies. It doesn't make any sense to me. I know that he's got a big following, and I know that there are people out there that are like wild, crazy animals when it comes to Rob Zombie's movies. I get it. I like a lot of what Rob Zombie's done. He's such an incredibly talented guy. He really is. He's got vision that nobody else can see. He's dripping and oozing with talent. But I don't understand the fascination that he has with making scumbag characters. I just don't understand it at all. He even made Michael Myers unlikable as a child. I get, that whole scene where he was interacting, or the whole scenes where he was interacting with the principal and the bullies at school. You feel bad for the kid because of where he came from, and then Rob turns around and makes that kid an asshole. I think that it's completely unnecessary. But now that I got all the complaining out of the way, I honestly did like this movie quite a bit. Back to Tyler Mane as Michael Myers, absolutely, positively terrifying. He was so awesome, and I actually met him. My wife and I met him years ago, and you would never know that such a friendly, nice guy could portray such a brutal killing machine in a movie. It was pretty spectacular. I love this movie, and I wish that it didn't take such a drastic turn after this for Halloween 2. Sweating. Coming in at number 3 is Halloween 2018. For me, there is absolutely nothing about this movie that I don't like. There's a couple things that I mentioned in my review that I thought were a little far-fetched. How these podcasters obtained a serial killer's mask from a evidence locker from 40 years ago. That's weird to me. A couple of nitpicky things as far as those podcasters are concerned were the only things that, and like I don't, it's not that I didn't like them, I just didn't think it was logical or possible or the way that actually would play out. But this movie was James Jude Courtney as Michael Myers with a little assistance from Nick Castle was fabulous. This is exactly what I wish all of these movies had in them. A scary Michael Myers that looked like Michael Myers, that moved and acted like Michael Myers. No grunting, just these two guys in this movie, I thought, portrayed that character better than anybody else ever has since the original 2 films when Nick Castle and Dick Warlock did it. This was great. It was scary. John Carpenter was involved, and you could tell. The score was great. The character was great. All of the other characters were great. The acting was great. You could tell that this had a big studio backing. Jamie Lee Curtis was back and awesome, and it severed severed from Halloween 1 on. No family crap. Michael Myers was after Laurie Strode because he was after Laurie Strode and not because it was his long-lost sister. And that, to me, makes him more terrifying. This dude sat in jail for 40 years waiting to get out to kill somebody that he doesn't know, that he's not related to, and that's it. He has been waiting. That is terrifying. That's so much scarier than some loony dude waiting to go back and kill his sister. That he killed one sister, he wants to go kill another sister. That, although nuts, makes more sense than a guy just saying, I tried to kill this woman twice. She got away twice. Now I'm going to say, well, you know what? It's not twice because Halloween 2 didn't exist. I tried to kill this woman in 1978, I'll put it that way. In 1978, and she got away. I didn't get to kill her. I'm going to sit here for 40 years, and when I get out, I'm going to go find her and I'm going to kill her. That's horrifying. That alone is more terrifying to me than anything else throughout the history of this movie. Trying to kill webcam guys, trying to kill his long-lost niece, trying to kill his sister. That's good stuff, I guess, in a horror movie, and it is scary, and it can be scary if it's made well. But to sit in prison for 40 years daydreaming about going back and killing somebody, that to me is far more horrifying than any of that other stuff is. As far as the movie itself goes, it's just, I thought it was a perfectly made film. It's not even close how much I like this movie more than the other movies that I mentioned prior to this. They're not even close. Rob Zombie's Halloween was the movie that came in 5th, and this one came in 4th, and this one is 3rd, and that gap between 3 and 4 is tremendous. That movie is not even close to how much I like this one. This one, in my opinion, is what the Halloween franchise is supposed to be, and I'm only praying that Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends are half as good as this one was. This movie, for me, is a masterpiece. Coming in at number 2 is Halloween 2. I personally believe that Halloween 2 is a perfect sequel to Halloween 1. The only downside of this thing is the wig that was on Jamie Lee Curtis's head when they made this movie. Outside of that, this movie's spectacular. I loved everything about it. This, I think, as much as it's not my very, very favorite movie, I'd say this one scared me as much as any other movie in this franchise ever has. More so than most of them, if not all of them. I thought that this was terrifying. It was more brutal than the original 78 film was. Michael Myers was a little bit more, I guess I don't want to even use the word aggressive with him, because the last thing in the world this guy seems to be is aggressive. But he, a little more brutal in his manner of killing people in this movie, I'll put it that way. There are 2 scenes in this movie that are, as a fan of this franchise and as a fan of the slasher genre and horror movies for as long as I have been, there's 2 kills in this movie that stand out to me as being 2 of the greatest of all time. When he kills the girl, or the nurse, with the scalpel and picks her up off the ground, that's one. And the other one is when he kills the girl in the hot tub. Just this movie, for those 2 scenes alone, is pretty legendary for me. But I thought that, again, Laurie Strode, or I keep referring to that woman as Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance were outstanding in this movie. They're just wonderful. I'm so glad that they were able to make a second movie and call those 2 characters back. And then, years down the road, they kept Pleasance, but they were able to get Jamie Lee Curtis back. She breathes life into whatever she's in. She's just a really cool woman in general, and she's a spectacular actress, pulling off and portraying a fantastic character. She is a very good yin to Michael Myers' yang, I guess. that makes any sense to you. I just love it. I absolutely love it. Halloween 2 is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite movies, not just favorite Halloween movies. I think it's scary as hell, very well made, very well acted, still feels like what that original Halloween movie was, and you can tell that it was made by some of the same people that were involved in the original film. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful movie. Coming in at number 1 is the original 1978 film, Halloween. Surprise, surprise. You even knew that one, didn't you? So if you guys know me, or you are familiar with my channel, anybody who has any knowledge of me whatsoever knows that Halloween is my favorite movie of all time. So I even mentioned in another video of mine a while back that any list of any kind that involves horror movies, Halloween is probably going to be number 1 on that list. 9 times out of 10 it is, and it obviously is going to be number 1 on this list. This is the movie that started it all. This is the beginning of Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers and John Carpenter and Laurie Strode and Nick Castle. This is where Deborah Hill, this is where the legacy was born, was right here, 1978's Halloween. I know that Black Christmas came first, and I know that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came first, but this movie is the movie that I believe 100% is responsible for the slasher explosion and the 80s horror explosion and Friday the 13th and all of that stuff that came after it was the direct result of the success of this movie. This movie gave all of us horror movie fans, the fans of this genre, years and years and years and years of things to talk about. I love everything about this movie. I've basically built a lifestyle around Michael Myers and Halloween. The movie is very simple. As Mustafa Akkad put it years ago, guy wants to kill the babysitter. It's the simplest concept. It really is. But it's carried out so well. Such brilliant filmmaking. Just the cinematography here, doing it in 21 days on a very low budget with a whole bunch of nobodies and Donald Pleasance. It's just this. It's amazing. I believe that I'm pretty positive of this. That this was the highest grossing independent film of all time until the Blair Witch Project came along, which that's an okay film, but it's clearly is not Halloween. But that tells you what this movie was and what this movie did and what this movie meant to cinema in general and the horror genre as a whole. This is one of the most important movies in horror that's ever been made. This is right there at the top of the list. There are a lot of legendary horror movies out there that are very important, and this movie has to be in the conversation of those. I mean, honestly, Michael Myers is one of those characters where if you present him to somebody who has never seen a Halloween movie in their life, chances are they know who he is. And if they don't know his name, they at least say, oh yeah, I've seen him before, right? I've seen that face before. He's up there in the top horror icons of all time. I mean, there's Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy Krueger, and maybe Leatherface. Those are just 4 pillars of horror, and Michael Myers is on that. He's on that pillar. Pillar may not be the right word. That's weird. A totem pole? Mount Rushmore? Something like that? I think you know what I mean. I love this guy, and that is all the result of that 1978 film made by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, what seemingly a lifetime ago. I was 7 years old when that movie came out. I probably saw it for the first time when I was either 8 or 9, airing on national television. And I remember that movie scaring me to death when I was a kid. And that sparked something inside of me. And this is one of the movies that is directly responsible for me becoming a lifelong horror movie fan. Yeah, I do love you. Don't get used to me saying that, though. I know that most of you already knew that this was going to be my number 1. So I'm assuming that most of you were probably interested to see how I ranked from 11 down to 2, but number 1 was pretty obvious. When I look back on these films, it's almost strange to see. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't strange. The way that these movies, I guess in the order that they were made and the way that they feel. Like if you go back to the beginning, Halloween 1 and 2 felt very, very similar. Halloween 3 was obviously a different film, very different, didn't have anything to do with the storyline, but it still felt like 1 and 2. 4 and 5 and 6 were all, I think they're referred to as the Thorn trilogy. 4 and 5 almost felt like the same movie, just real long and cut in half to make 2 movies, like made at the same time, where 6 was supposed to be the ending of that trilogy, but felt completely different than they did. And then you have parts 7 and 8, H2O and Resurrection. They felt very, very similar, but 7 was a much better film than 8 was. Then you have the 9th and 10th films made by Rob Zombie that felt exactly the same. Again, they almost felt like they could have been made all at once, all at the same time, one long movie, and then cut in half. Everybody likes the first film's characters, everybody dislikes the second film's characters. Felt the same, but felt very different at the same time, if that makes sense. And then there's the 2018 film that felt very different on its own, but it really felt like a modern day spin on the original 2 movies. So that, for me, is why I feel so strongly about the 2018 film, is it's a throwback and reminds me of the first 2 movies. In my mind, that's how all these things are arranged out and sorted out. If that makes any sense to you, it makes perfectly good sense to me. So I guess that's the part that's important. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Do me a favor, leave me some comments down below and let me know what your rankings of the Halloween, or your ranking of the Halloween franchise is. I'm very curious to see how many of you feel the same way I do about these movies and how many of you feel differently about these movies and why. I gotta get out of here. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you really like this video and you've been enjoying my content up to this point, please do me a huge personal favor. Click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Have a kick-ass day. And thank you for watching. Happy Halloween, folks. Take care, brother. I'll be seeing you.